We're good.
You good? Alright. This is free, right? This is free for you guys? Because last time admission was $10. I was like, oh no. If it's $10, I can give you your money's worth. But $20, push it. But this time it's free, so we got 2 hours. We got 2 hours. So we're gonna do this pretty informally. Mia cooked up a bunch of slides. Last time I had no slides whatsoever. Because I like to just kind of go in, just shoot from the hip. So if at any time during the presentation you guys just have a question, just raise your hand. You know, if it gets like ridiculous, if you guys have questions every 30 seconds, then we'll keep it down a little bit. But for the most part, if you guys find something clear or just want a little bit more, just want to know a little bit more, then just raise your hand. We'll get questions like that. Okay. Huh? Okay, so we'll just wait till the commotion stops like that. We're both a little bit sick, so our voices are a little bit shot. So if at any point you can't hear us, just raise your hand, tell us you can't hear us, and we'll raise our voices. Okay, so I think we're good. I'll introduce myself. I'm Eddie Zhang. I graduated from Swarthmore College, studied neuroscience. I did a lot of stuff in high school. We'll go into our experiences toward the middle of the presentation, but you guys can have a sense of what we're talking about. But I did a lot of stuff. I was a cyclist, raced bikes for a long time. I was involved in a lot of musical theater. I was one of 2 Asian Americans in the drama department. At Saratoga. I didn't go to Los Gatos, so this is at Saratoga. Everyone's Asian. There were still only 2 people Asian in the drama department. What else did I do? I did a lot of stuff. I included a little tagline in my bio. One of my college essays made the admissions counselor who was reading it cry. I can tell you a little bit about that too. But yeah, this is going to be, again, like I said, pretty informal. Our experiences are going to be pretty big, pretty integral to the presentation. Mia here is along. She's another student at Swarthmore College, going to be an incoming senior. She's from the East Coast, which is why we brought her along. Because, of course, a lot of us, being Asian American or South Asian American, we like to compare ourselves to what the white people are doing. Maybe if not the students here, then some of the parents. I've always heard, oh, but what are the white people doing? Like, how do they figure these things out? Well, we have an expert at being white in the audience. First laughs. Okay, good. Cool. So we have an expert white person on the panel today. Talk a little bit about yourself.
So as he said, my name's Mia Ferguson. I'm a student still at Swarthmore College, where I study engineering as well as anthropology. I'm right now working as a software developer, actually over in Virginia or near DC. So developing smart glass technology. And for the month, I'm out here working at an all-girls technology camp teaching Java. So I'm here for a little bit, but I'm definitely interested in how colleges and getting into higher education are incorporated with people's individuality and how they experience life in a more personal way than just filling in a lot of check boxes.
Yeah. And getting good test scores.
And test scores, because I definitely I had decent test scores in high school, but I think what helped me stand out and get into college was definitely my interpersonal skills, as well as the extracurricular activities that I pursued and was genuinely interested in.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background on our college. Our college takes, depending on the year, 25 to 50% of the incoming class are valedictorians. It's the top of the class, like the top person in the class. It's considered the most academically rigorous liberal arts college. It's the MIT of liberal arts colleges. Has a pretty low admissions rate. It's like anywhere between 12 to 17%, depending on the year. And it's pretty rigorous. Neither of us had super outstanding grades. Our test scores, mine were average. Yours were actually pretty good. I got in on the basis of being suave and manipulating the admissions officers. And I say that in kind of a position. I'm mostly joking. I befriended my admissions officers and became really good friends with them. And so I got in kind of on the strength of this relationship I could establish both with my essay and also with my visits. I knew them personally. And so a lot of the knowledge that I'm bringing into this presentation today is actually based off of my conversations with them. It's a lot of the stuff that they're not allowed to say because, of course, they're under contract by the college. So I'm telling you some basic admission secrets. So that's a school. All right.
So we'll start talking a little bit about admissions policy and the benefits of being involved in extracurricular activities when it comes to admissions, as well as just being a person and living your life. And then talk more about how those extracurricular activities can reflect your own interests and what you actually enjoy and are passionate about. And we'll talk a little bit more about our experiences and then how you might write that up in an essay, which Eddie does really well. So if you want to put the next one.
All right. So the next one? Okay. I don't know this slide at all. Mia actually just threw it all together. It's really pretty, has nice animations. That's all here. So admissions. Okay, so we're going to talk about a little bit of, I'm going to mention just really briefly what I talked about in my last talk. Don't worry if you weren't there for that. Who was there at my last talk? Who sees my face and thinks it's familiar? Anyone? You? Okay. Oh, I recognize your face too? Okay. Alright, so clean break. Alright, so my last talk was about how Asian Americans specifically, because I look at the room, it's all Asian American, how Asian Americans can adapt themselves to fit admissions criteria, because they're changing. Along with a number of, because admissions officers are becoming more aware of Asian Americans, the problem is they also see us as more and more the same. We offer what is a pretty homogenous admissions package. Our profiles are all the same, test scores are all unbelievably high. We like to do more or less the same things, both extracurricular and within the curriculum. It's hard for an admissions officer to kind of sit through all these applications and then make a decision. They're all at 99.9%. Right? Who has the last 0.01%? That's what they're looking at. It's hard. And so they've changed their admissions criteria somewhat to better target certain non-cognitive traits. So these are traits like pretty cliche stuff. Things like leadership, social responsibility, interpersonability, things like this. Right? And so these are becoming quantifiable rubrics, criteria by which an admissions officer will look at a student's application and evaluate. So these things, they're pretty subjective, but I think that just looking at an essay, you can actually determine, quite easily. If someone writes an essay about why they want to go to college, and all they say is, because I like the computer science program. Well, they're not going to get it, right? Or at the very least, that's not going to help. That's a lot of points that are being given away. So this statistic is something really interesting we just found looking over things. If you have an SAT score between this very narrow range at the top end of the spectrum, you're still not really that much more likely to get in. So Princeton's admission rate, you want to know what that is? 7%? Yeah. So 7% reflects a lot of people who apply and basically know that they don't really have a chance of getting in. They're just kind of shooting for it. Right? So if you kind of looked at people who have more of a serious chance of getting in, among those people, the rate kind of doubles, right? Around 12% or so, right? If you kind of look at people with more serious identification. And then you look at the number, the percentage of people who apply with these super SAT scores, right? If you take the commerce of this, it's 16.5%. So going from, so if you have a super high SAT score, you're only about 4.5%, or the rate only jumps up 4.5% for your likelihood to be admitted to Princeton. So it's not, it helps, right? But at the same time, it doesn't distinguish you in any serious way. And that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so how are you going to distinguish yourself? Right? So, there's the idea, right, that admissions profiles, right, the questions they ask, the essays you write, it's very hard to express yourself individually through these criteria, right? They just ask you, why do you want to come to our college? Well, because it's good. I mean, that's kind of the real reason, but there are ways to answer that can reflect your individuality. There are ways to look through your life experiences and to choose your life experiences that significantly boost your chances beyond this 16.5%. So it's it's a pretty high number. They're not accepted. That was pretty shocking to me, and I of course have my preconceptions about things. Moving on, it's a right button, right? Okay.
So, for those who are looking to stand out in the admissions process, one of the ways you can do that is through expanding your extracurricular habits as well as activities. So that can be from, being on the swim team, but also engaging in something that's a lot more personal to you and something you really care about. And for me, that ended up really helping me expand my understanding of the world I was entering in, make me feel safer, make me feel more able to exist in the college space. So that is, moving. I'm from Massachusetts, from Boston, or I live right by MIT, and I went to school in Philadelphia, so about 2 or 6 hours drive away, so not too far. But for me, leaving home meant that I had to be more independent, had to think for myself, had to know when to go to class, which classes to take, and which major I wanted to be. And doing that was a lot more easy because I had independence throughout high school, throughout my middle school time, and was able to think for myself. That also meant that I was able to cope with changes in the surroundings and also the high pressure that did come at being in a school like Swarthmore. And same thing applies to the Ivy League schools or to MIT, other institutions like that. So a big problem that happens on college campuses is suicidality. So that is, we have hundreds of students, thousands of students across the country who experience a huge pressure or depression or mental health problem that leads to their attempting or considering suicide. This is particularly problematic in an Asian American population. So suicide is actually the second leading cause of death for Asian Americans ages like 15 to 34. This does differ outside of the age group, but this is particularly for folks in college. So I had one of my friends, Sato, completed suicide at MIT a couple years ago during his first year, because when he entered there, despite his parents being nearby and having a decent amount of support academically.
They were Nobel laureates.
Yeah, his dad was a Nobel laureate, very accomplished family, wonderful boy, and he completed suicide and died during the first 3 months he was at college. And a lot of this for me felt like he didn't have the opportunity to explore independently, and he was left in a room by himself all the time when he got to school and wasn't able to engage with people, wasn't able to make friends, and didn't have his peer group there to help him out. So there's a big motivation beyond just getting into college to explore extracurricular activities that help you actually engage with yourself and engage with your peers so that you have connections and meaningful relationships that will help you moving forward. So for me, that comes out a lot in making sure that people feel supported, that my friends don't feel sad, and that they also have every access to personal desire, like they have personal motivations for being involved in school, for being involved in academic life, that don't just come from an external source. So in the end, it seems like independence, I think what we have up there, independence and individuality really help you produce coping mechanisms for coming into that environment. So be it a coping mechanism so that you can deal with a high stress situation, so that you can be happier when learning. I think for me, at least, when I feel happy in a classroom, I learn a lot more. I'm a lot more dedicated to my schoolwork. My projects end up being better when I'm genuinely interested. So that's been helpful, and I think a lot of that came for me through both being involved in extracurricular activities I loved, extracurricular activities that taught me how to communicate, how to engage with other people, and most importantly, how to think and be conscious in everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, so just to follow up, the statistic on suicide here, I mean, it's not just the leading cause of death for Asian Americans, but it's actually it's actually still very high. It's one of the highest for any race, relative to other races. And that's just a statistic that we were able to, I mean, that's just one of the statistics we were able to find. For other rates, of other various misfortunes that might befall somebody, Asian Americans still very high in this age group. So what we mean to say is that, oh, go ahead.
Well, if you put this slide, it's almost the second. This is an overwhelming question, right? But a lot of parents would think, okay, that's other people's job,
Yeah.
my job. What would you say?
There's another example at MIT of a student who completed suicide in 2000. Her name was Elizabeth Shin. The day before she killed herself, her parents had come to visit with, I think, one of her siblings. She seemed happy, she was loving school, she was great with her schoolwork, and the next day they found out that she had completed suicide on campus. It actually turned into a very big lawsuit at MIT, and there's a decent amount of data on it. But her parents were shocked, right? She seemed happy, she seemed fine. In a lot of ways, it was just also that she couldn't communicate with her parents. So in a lot of ways, yes, I don't know if I would necessarily call up my mother if I felt really sad about something specific, depending on what it was. But knowing that if it were really bad, I could call her would be really helpful. And also knowing that I knew how to talk to my peer. So Eddie over at Swarthmore, for example, I should know how to go up to him and say, I don't feel good, I feel terrible, and be able to have that conversation with another student, know that I can access another student, and have those kinds of dialogues.
So of course, the point of the slide isn't for the parents in this audience to go, oh my God, and then walk into their student's room and be like, are you gonna kill yourself? Okay, that's not the point of the slide. Yeah, the point of the slide is that, maybe the wrong thing to say. So the point here is that a lot of us, especially in parents among us, there's a lot of care, right? There's a lot of time and effort devoted to our kids in the sense that we want them to succeed, right? But our definition of success is basically, you're 18, you got into Harvard, great job. But as we're talking about here, as Mia mentioned, life doesn't end there. That's not anybody's happy ending, right? You get into college, and if you're not prepared to go to college, if you're only prepared to get into college, which is different from going to college, then you're really setting, you're really, there's a part of your child's life that you're not setting up, which is this ability to cope in this entirely new environment. So let's move on to the next thing. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So, again, not that all of your children will feel suicidal or feel really depressed. And a big way to alleviate that, if they do feel sad or something, is to find their own passions and experiences and interests. So instead of focusing on patching up something that already feels sad, in a preventative sense, helping them gain their own interests and explore their own passions is really important. Do you want to inform them about that?
What the passions are? Yeah, so there's something really, I think, deep in the Asian American community where desire is implanted by the parents in a large percentage of cases. And of course this isn't everybody. But in a large percentage of cases, it's implanted. I don't mean implanted, I say implanted specifically, because it's not as though in every case the parent is just dropping the kid off somewhere and saying, you're doing this. It's the kid internalizing the desire of the parent and saying, maybe I should do this, maybe I should not this, maybe this is what I have to do. But, parents here, we're not, parents here, I shouldn't say we, I'm not a parent. Parents here are not the most experienced U.S. high schoolers. The kids are the experienced U.S. high schoolers. And so there's something here about, who the authority is on a subject. And I think with parents, especially in the Chinese American community and in the greater East Asian, South Asian community at large, there's this. Go ahead, just walk around. It's okay. Front row seats. You didn't even have to pay. Yeah. So, the parents feel as though they're the authority on the matter, but you have to remember, actually no, it's your kids who are. Right? They're the ones who are navigating high school. They're the ones who are navigating contemporary U.S. culture, and letting go a little bit of this control that you have, or in some cases all of it, is the right thing to do. Not in the sense that I think a lot of parents have there's a paranoia here. Oh, if I give my kids all the control, then they're lazy. They'll just play video games all day. But the thing is, there's a reason they're playing video games, which is that's where they're finding control. And if you'd allowed them control in the first place, video games wouldn't even be on the table. And that's one of the major points here for parents I want to make in this overall lecture, which is that control is something that in the short term might seem like a very daunting, a very scary investment, but it's a very significant long-term return. And so this is going to be very relevant when we talk about how you, as a parental and student unit, can figure out where your student, where your child can go, which activities you want to pursue, and how, what you want to do exactly. Because it doesn't matter if you're, let's say it doesn't matter, if you're on like a national orchestra, or you're the best piano player, in a given unit of space. It doesn't matter if you're a swimmer, right? It doesn't matter if you're really good at playing tennis. Those are all things that when an admissions officer looks at your profile, they're still going to say, well, that's something their parents chose for the next one. This is, wow, I did not see this picture. That's huge. Did you want to explain this at all? Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Usually we have to ask them.
Okay.
So on the same note, for especially the children in the audience, are there things that you feel right now you are interested in? What do you care about? What are you actually interested in?
Yeah, I mean, this is something. I mean, just raise your hand, right? We want to know what's up. We got parents too. Yeah, if your child isn't here, parents, just tell us in their stead. I know I just said not to do that, but do that. But for students, I mean, we want to know what you guys are into right now. Anyone just raise your hand. What's up?
Oh, badminton.
Yeah, you're into badminton. Yeah, and I bet you are into badminton. I mean, I don't mean this in any kind of derogatory sense, but there's a stereotype, which is Asians are really good at badminton. And I mean, I am too. I've never played badminton. The other day I picked up a racket and I beat someone so hard. I mean, because it's in my genes.
Probably me.
So I mean, it's there. It's a stereotype. But for anyone who was there at my last lecture, there's this idea that breaking stereotypes is becoming a very important thing for Asian American students to know. Because I mean, think of white stereotypes, right? Like white students who are getting into the Ivy Leagues. What stereotypes can we think of? It's not. It's
White supremacy.
White supremacy is there, but that's not exactly a stereotype. I mean, it's a it applies to everybody in a larger social cultural sense, in the sense that they have benefits that we don't. But I'm talking about stereotypes that an admissions officer might have to discriminate against a white student. I mean, it's very difficult to think of one, right? But Asian students, we come along and we're all programmers. We all swim. We all play badminton. We all play tennis. We all play violin or piano. And boom, that's not just one profile. That's everybody's profile, right? And that tells an admissions counselor a lot of things we don't want to actually tell them. And so, in this presentation, the goal is to kind of bring about ways to think about things that can bring you to new places. That's not to say that in this presentation, if you play badminton or you play piano, then you're screwed. I mean to say that there are ways to think about this experience too, even if it is fairly stereotypical, that can also make you stand out. There are ways to evaluate how something has changed your life that isn't just, oh, it made me good at leadership, or, oh, I have friends because of it. So there's a test I have for college essays. If you can replace your college, like, you're talking about like an activity you did, if you can replace whatever activity you did with smoking weed, and the essay still makes sense, it's not a very good essay. So let's take an example. So let's say because of smoking weed, I've been able to make a lot of friends, and this has helped me become very mature in how I deal with people. In fact, smoking weed has introduced me to a lot of adults that I'm now, and so on and so forth. So it has become entirely interchangeable. If you can make this unique in a way such that it's distinguishable from illegal recreations, or legal if you have a medical marijuana license, that's a better essay. That's a step towards differentiating yourself from something. But typically, from the essays I've read that I've come across, oftentimes it isn't. You can replace it with murder. You can replace it with all sorts of terrible things, and the essay still makes sense, and that's a problem. So we're going to talk about those things, like how to not be stereotypical, or if you are stereotypical, how to think about your experiences in a non-stereotypical way. All right, our experiences. I think. What do you think? Who should go first?
Since it was me, I did that one.
Okay. I think I want to go first, just because Mia's experience is, I think, particularly. It's a cornerstone, I think, for how uniqueness can play into a profile. For me, my particular profile is also somewhat different in the sense that my grades weren't particularly great. I had no business applying to Swarthmore. That was, like earlier, like I said, there were a lot of kind of non-serious, like, reach applications for that. That was me to Swarthmore. My GPA was like a 3.5 unweighted, which a lot of people say, oh wow, great, but we're Asian, so that's terrible. I was practically failing high school. I almost dropped out. My SAT was just 22 flat. And so my scores are, I think, fairly, especially for this area, for an Asian American male student, is fairly, below average, if that. But I had other things on my side that told my particular admissions officer a lot of things about me. The first was that I was, at the time of application, a 6-time state champion in cycling. That's you first. That's me. That's me 5 years ago. This is me in 2009. This is me at the beginning of the state championships in 2009. This is something that at the time nobody was interested in. It's not something that your parents do and kind of rope you into because we're Asian. We didn't even know we could race bikes. We just ride them to the supermarket. We're from China. Lots of bikes. Okay, they're not for racing. They're for groceries. Here, I mean, I was racing bikes. I was riding every weekend. I'd go out and ride 120 miles as just basic training. And I would explore the Bay Area. I'd ride from the South Bay here to Half Moon Bay on the weekends, just to explore by myself. I got into it because I read a book by Lance Armstrong, by whom I feel especially betrayed now. But it's okay, he did this for me. And I read his book, was very inspired. Walked into a bike shop, Cupertino bike shop just down the street. Walked into the bike shop, met the owner, and said, "Can I work for you?" I had just turned 14 at the time, and he said, "You're a little young. I can't pay you." I'm like, "That's fine." And we're also Asian. We used to slave labor. So I said, "Okay." I walked in and I started helping. About a month later, when school ended, I just showed up and started helping. So through this, I was introduced to this new community, people who were willing to look after me because I was young. But I was wanting to learn in a way that, about this thing that basically hardly anybody knew about. I was inducted into the community, started racing, found a club for myself, told my parents where to drive me, of course. If they couldn't drive me, I would just ride my bike there and start racing. So, this is, I think, it's looking, like, going forward, I wasn't thinking, how do I make myself unique to college and my officers? I was thinking, I'm just going to race my bike professionally, I don't need to go to college. That's what I was thinking at the time. Of course, my parents didn't know this, which is why I was able to continue. But I was, I was fairly independent, for lack of a better word. I was doing this for me. I was doing this in a way that I thought was meeting my goals. I created these goals. Oftentimes without my parents knowing at all. I'd sneak off in the middle of the night to ride my bike when my parents wouldn't let me ride during the day. It's just something I really enjoyed doing for myself, and it taught me these things. And I mean to say, taught me, not in a general sense. I don't mean it taught me things like leadership or whatever. I mean that every time I went to a race, I noticed myself becoming less awkward. I noticed myself being able to say hi to someone in a less awkward or off-putting way. I noticed myself making friends more easily. When I spoke, people listened to me better, right? Because cycling, unbeknownst to most, is a team sport. And eventually I was made captain of the team. I ended up taking charge of this team. And it ended up being a really successful career. By the time I had stopped cycling for other reasons, I was a 6-time state champion, was a 1-time national champion, due to some other team got disqualified. It's a long story, but ended up being a national champion, and that ended up being this long saga in my life, where if I wasn't intentional, looking forward, making goals, or knowing exactly where I wanted to be. I wasn't planning anything. I was intentional looking back. I was intentional with how I wanted, or rather how I was trying to see myself in the context of all this stuff. I was trying to figure out what exactly it taught me. I've come to the conclusion it taught me a lot. I'm a much more capable person because I can speak in front of the crowd and not freak out. There are a lot of things that are heavily concrete abilities. You might call them soft abilities, but if you can think of memories in which you can change, they're tangible things, they're real things. And that's cycling. The other thing I was really heavily involved in was theater. I graduated, of course, from college now with a degree in neuroscience. I entered being like studio art and theater. Yeah, she should know this about me. I swung from one end to the other, but I suppose I was a very, one would say, creatively minded person, and I was into performing. I was into getting attention because attention. And that helped me too in this particular way. That had a little bit more to do with breaking stereotypes explicitly. Because in cycling, nobody knew what cycling was. So even within the cycling community, we were all just trying to get along. We were just trying to not get hit by a car. So racism wasn't so much a problem there. It was a problem, within the high school system. At Saratoga High, at the time that I was there was a white parking lot, an Asian parking lot. Asians did Asian things, white people did white things. There was a white Christian group and an Asian Christian group, so much for fellowship or whatever. There's segregation just down the line. And I was one of those people who, for some reason, maybe I was dumb or, just clueless, I walked into the theater party. And there's a lot of, if not explicit racism in the sense that people give you weird looks for doing something, And there's a kind of institutional inequality because we're not interested in doing these non-hard skilled or hard science things. And so I had no idea what I was doing. I was awkward, I mumbled on stage. No one could hear me. I forgot my lines all the time. I didn't know what I was doing. And it took me a few years. I stuck with it. Partially because this is something that does have intention looking forward. I didn't want to be like the other Asian students. There was a kind of monotony to the standard Asian profile or the standard Asian schedule of things. I didn't want to do that. And so theater was this way for me to remind myself, like, okay, if you do this show, you are slightly less stereotypical. If you do this next show, if you get a better lead role, right, you are demonstrating to people, anyone who watches you, that Asians can do this too. You're demonstrating that it's not specifically a white person thing to do, right? You're going somewhere and allowing other Asian students to follow after you. And that's what kept me in that. And that's a trait, I think, specifically that was very impressive. In conversation with my admissions counselors and things she told me, it was very impressive to her. That's what it demonstrated, right? In this, because she knows the high schools around here. All admissions officers are assigned a geographic region, so they know the region very well. They know all the high schools. They know what the demographics look like. They knew what I was doing. They were like, "Oh my God! Like, we've never seen an Asian American student do theater before. We've never seen an Asian American student who's so shameless that he'll take the role of Danny Zuko in Grease." That kind of thing. And they saw that and were impressed. And directly afterward, other Asian students would even tell me, right, like in somewhat of a joking way, like, "Oh, you're the Asian Danny Zuko. Oh, but how'd you do it?" Like, well, like, doesn't it seem weird to you? And I said no, and they're like, "Well, I actually want to do theater as well." So this kind of claiming spaces, being willing to be the first, or the first or second, depending on how me and the other Asian student in the department would trade places. That tells the admissions officer something, right? It makes you question: is that worth 0.2, 0.3 points in the GPA? Is that worth 100 points in the SAT? What's really the difference between 2,200 and 2,300 in the SAT, right? But what's the difference between having this experience versus not having the experience? I think one divide is actually much greater than the other. Having said that, my experience is, still within the constraints of the Bay Area. There are things that, even with the most intrepid person, not saying I am, but even with the most fearless person who's willing to break any kind of stereotype, we're still in the bubble. We're still in a South Bay kind of mentality, and this keeps us from doing a little bit more. But on the other hand, you have if you look on the East Coast, you look at what people who are relatively unconstrained are doing, and you can draw a sense of inspiration. You can look at how they can provide these examples for the things to do. Because here, again, students are fairly constrained by what their parents think, by what their peers think. There's a standard set of things to do. But elsewhere, there isn't that kind of general agenda that's being pushed. So Mia, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Do you mind if I stand up?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll go back to this picture. It's so dramatic.
Yeah, right?
Why did you pick this picture?
So, as you can see, I also did a lot of theater, just like Eddie, in high school. By the time I got to college, I didn't feel I had the time to dedicate to theater. I think I did one show and then moved on from there and focused on my academics a bit, which is where I started studying engineering as well as anthropology. But even in high school and in elementary and middle school, I think the big focus for me, my big motivation for almost everything that I did academically and outside of the classroom was people. So I care about people for some reason, don't know why, but even when I was a little kid, I had some type of fervor for social justice.
Mia founded a nonprofit when she was 3 years old.
Yes, it's true. So for me, everything.
That wasn't a joke. Oh, serious. That happened.
So everything came back to people and caring about people, sometimes animals, but mainly people. People are animals, I guess, give or take. So for me, that ended up meaning that even being involved in theater, it was because I wanted to amuse people. I wanted people to be able to connect with an emotion that I was expressing when I was on stage or when I was off stage, and so that they could really connect with me. So I think for me, theater ended up being an outlet, both emotionally, and also an outlet for me to figure out how to communicate with other people and how to get other people to empathize with me and kind of be on the same page as me. So that's something that ended up helping me a lot as I did move into more leadership roles in high school and then in college as well, because I knew how to talk to people, I think, and try. Sometimes my words don't make sense, so I'm sorry about that. And I was able to connect with people because of my experience in performing, as well as just my everyday experience in being interested in other human beings. So this came out in a few different ways. For one thing, we have the theater stuff, which was based out of my high school. I also went to an all-girls high school, which was a whole different experience, but we did theater with a boys' school as well. So for me, theater was a big thing, but so was singing and performing in general, and I'll touch on that more later. The other thing that ended up being a really big passion for me, and you can kind of see this through the gloomy suicide statistics we saw earlier, was being involved in something called the Samaritans, which was a phone hotline that provided service to people who were suicidal, depressed, or just wanted someone to talk to. So for a few hours every week, I'd sit on an office, pick up the phone, and hear from strangers about their lives. So this was a lot of the time very tiring. I kind of just wanted to go home and take a nap. But sitting in this environment and having to think about other people, think about how to respond to other people, definitely taught me both how to think on my feet and also how to think very consciously. So to be very actively involved in what I was doing so that I knew that I really cared about everything that I was doing regardless of it being theater, performing, my schoolwork, all of that kind of stuff. I could sit down and I knew how to ask questions. And these came from me, not from an external source, because I was the only other person on the end of that phone line. So this was really important for me. The other activity, kind of sports related, I got into water skiing. I was spending some time up in New Hampshire, or over in New Hampshire, I guess. Cold place, but there was a big lake there, and I saw a lot of people water skiing on it. Eventually, happened to make friends with one of the guys who was skiing. This was when I was like 8 or so. And I hopped right into the water and he taught me how to ski, and then I got very dedicated to the sport and ended up running my own water sports business with a good friend. So a lot of different kinds of activities, but for me, all of these were about helping other people, providing a service, and engaging with other human beings, which I know isn't everyone's forte, but definitely helped me focus and figure out my academic choices as well. So in the academic sense, engineering for me is about helping solve problems in the world. So be it having a better touchpad on your computer, or having fun new technology, or having a technological tool that helps you in the workplace. All of those things for me are about helping other people or the world. And anthropology came in because in order to create those tools that help people, I have to understand culture and environments and all of the people who could be using them. I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not sat on that phone line with the Samaritans and talked to hundreds or thousands of people across the state of Massachusetts, across the country, and learned what their lives were like behind closed doors. So this wasn't about, their bio, their resume, anything like that. It was about who they actually were and what they were really experiencing. So it was a really good opportunity for me in that sense. And so what was also really important was that these were all things that I chose to do of my own volition. So I had particular motivations for it. Again, I said people in some way is my big motivation. But I had a close friend complete suicide. I loved performing. I loved sport and theater and competition, but if I do anything with basketball or too close, I get too aggressive and it doesn't go well. So I stuck to a sport where I didn't have to come in contact with anyone. But all of these things were from myself. And what was really fun, I have 3 older sisters, all who go to great colleges and universities, and also were pretty present in my life, and also 2 wonderful parents who were able to help me and support me in what I did, but they let me make the choice on my own in a lot of ways. So they encouraged me to pursue interests, and they certainly did instill in me that interest in people or in caring and being performative and communicating. But I chose to be involved with the Samaritans. I chose to be involved in water skiing. I chose to be involved in different theatrical activities. And they were there every step of the way when I needed help, if I asked for help. And they were conscious of what I was doing, what emotional capacity it took up, and then how to help me in pursuing more activities that would help me, yes, get into college, and once I was in college as well. A big one of these for me was an organization called the Boston Children's Chorus. So it's a pretty big choir now. I think it has 500 kids and lots of branches of locations. And so I was a founding member of this choir because one day, I think in my school, I saw some flyer up on the wall and it said Boston Children's Chorus auditions. And I thought, ooh, I like to sing and I like attention. I'll sign up for those. So I went home and I told my mother about this, and she said, all right, give them a call and I'll bring you to your audition. So she did, it was great, all went well. I stayed in the choir for 8 years, all through high school. And I saw it grow. And a big piece of the choir was also talking about leadership and also involving a huge range of people. So a big goal of the organization was social justice, so using music to cross social divides, which was a helpful component in the way I thought about things, but also was interesting for my parents to become involved in. So I have 2 very white parents and 3 very, very white sisters. And for them, being involved in this organization helped them increase their consciousness as well. So what was fun for me as the youngest daughter, I think I was 9 or so when I joined the choir, was that I had my whole family behind me and joining me in this effort. So every time I performed on stage, every time I introduced them to a new friend from a totally different part of Boston, it was a new engaging experience for them as well. To the point where they got really passionate about it. Now my dad's on the board of the choir, which is interesting because I'm like, I've forgotten about it, it's in my past, but he's still there. So when I go back, I can visit the office and sit and watch him in meetings, but I can't participate in the rehearsals. But, so that was really fun. Getting them involved, feeling like they chose it because though they wanted to be involved, it was because of what I genuinely wanted. So I got to have a leadership role in my family and also in the choir in that kind of environment. So even having that kind of role in my family, having some kind of mutual experience where my parents would teach me a lot of things, but they also were open to learning from me, meant that I was a lot more confident as a leader, as a performer, as a speaker. So in the choir, I was the first president of the choir, student president. I established a section leaders program, and then I became the student body president of my high school, and was able to jump into these leadership positions because it's something my parents fostered with me at the dinner table by asking me tough questions that were really about what I was interested in. Anything else in the position?
No, that's real.
Okay.
That's 100.
What?
That's 100. Okay. Yeah. So let's move on a little bit. Oh,
This is their interesting.
Oh,
Remember how we were talking
theirs.
about
Oh my. Okay. That's back to me.
it? So we were wondering, on that rail, that we've talked a decent amount about things that we're really interested in. So that can be a specific activity, like badminton. Or it can be, like for me, caring about people. Are there specific things that you feel, as a student, as a parent, you're particularly interested in? Is there something you really care about? And this can be like, if you have an answer, would you just raise your hand? And no judgment. Do any of the students have things that they care about? Anything that you're interested in? If someone were to ask you perhaps on a college, or if any of you have been writing college essays, what's a topic that you've written about? What's something you've considered writing about?
My school's robotics team.
So robotics, school robotics team. Does anyone have anything else?
My son, he is into lots of activity, but he kind of this big dream. He just wants to make a difference. That's what he wants to do.
So making some kind of change.
Yes.
Okay.
Does he have an idea of through what exactly?
No, he's going into the high, so
Okay.
I think he's still quite young. Yeah. But
Okay.
he's into speech debate. He likes writing. He's playing basketball, and he loves people. He's a really people. So, but he also needs some direction, like what he can focus his energy into.
Sure. Yeah, those are always fun types because they want to do something, right? And it's one. I mean, for me, like I would say I was one of those types, and I just kind of showed up one day, into a bike shop, and that was that. It just takes
I
a
have one
small.
question.
Oh, I'm still answering the question. Hold on a second. And that was, I mean, it ended up being as spontaneous as that. So how old is he exactly?
He's going into freshman.
Okay, cool. All right, yeah. So that was about when I started. I started being interested in this kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, does he have any idea or any kind of inclination? Not sure. Okay. All right. Just have faith. All right. So yeah, your question, sir?
Yeah, what happens if you don't have any interest and don't have any talent?
Yeah.
But that type of kid.
Sure.
What
Well, the thing
do we
is,
do?
I mean, that was me. I mean, I had an interest in trying to be interested. So I'm talking about me at around like 13 years old. I don't think it would have mattered if I was 13, 14, 15, but in terms of when I started doing things. But my interest was just trying to do something. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no particular talents. Everything I ever started, I quit. I did piano for 10 months, quit that. Did violin for 2 months, quit that. I was really good playing video games. I mean, really good. But that was it. I'm exactly like the person you said. I was basically talentless. But I think that I wouldn't have been there if I had someone in my life telling me that I was talented, right? Or who had a sense of who I was, right? I think that to make this judgment, I'm not saying you are, but I think some parents really do. They say, "Oh, my kid, it's like a sheep," right? Which is like he has no chance. And my parents told me that a few times. Like, you're just going to go to the marina market down the road and sell fish. That's going to be your life. You've used. I know some of you have used that insult. She's not. She's guilty. Yeah. So. And and for a while I was thinking, I guess that's it. I'm gonna be selling fish. I might as well research fish. So I remember an afternoon I started researching fish. But I'm saying that was an afternoon that I think if I hadn't been told that, it would have been spent doing something maybe more productive. If someone had said, "Hey, we don't know what your talents are yet," right? That doesn't mean you're talentless, right? Because look at us, right? We're a crowd full of what are basically China's most intelligent and most talented, right? If you believe in the sense that in the idea that our children inherit our genetic talents or abilities to some degree, then there's no way our children can't be talented. So it's a matter of just asking, right? And I think some of the hesitation in this room reflects the nervousness about coming out with something, with saying, "Hey, actually, I'm just really into fashion." Right? It's like, actually, that's really cool. Like, fashion is a really complex. I mean, there's history behind it, and it's a really, really complicated history behind it. If you can demonstrate mastery of this, if you can show that you know something about fashion and what it says about a person. What a trend is on a cultural level, that's impressive. Most adults in this room, judging by how some of y'all dress, we don't understand fashion. So knowing fashion, that's something that's quite impressive. Or something like Latin American literature, just being into that. That Latin American literature comes from a very specific tradition of writing, that conveys very specific emotions that are culturally specific. If you, as an Asian American student, are into Latin American literature, you're seeing a totally different world, right? And that's impressive. You're seeking that out. That's more impressive, I think. So, for weird things, even for stereotypical things, we want to know, right? Because you could be the most stereotypical applicant ever, but let's say you have a perspective on it, right? Like, let's say you're doing it because you're aware that it's stereotypical, right? I mean, let's say that's a perfectly valid reason as well, right? Because you're exploring stereotypes. I mean, there are an infinite number of good reasons, right, to be doing something, even if it is stereotypical or cliche or so on and so forth. So let's ask again. What are you guys into? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to know where you found courage or continue after the like a mumbling at the theater. How you continue after those kind of trouble.
Sometimes laziness is your friend. I was too lazy to quit. I would rather be embarrassed again and again than say, I have to do something about this. That's honestly what it was. I would say that's more about luck, in the sense that I was lazy about the right thing. But the other thing is that there is an element of bravery, and I think that's not really something that is unique to me. I think you put 10 people in my situation, 9 people are going to act the way I did. They're going to stick with me, if they really like it. And I think the problem is putting someone in a situation where they're allowed to make that choice for themselves, right?
And they typically will make the right choice.
Right.
And it seems like too, being in an environment, or so for me, a lot of that was accessing mentorship that wasn't just through my parents or through my family. So feeling like I could even come to like this kind of learning center and have someone like Eddie teach me about what it could be like to go to school. Or teach me about how to use a computer in a certain way. And even if it was something that I didn't initially think I was interested in, being validated and encouraged by someone else who didn't really have some external motive, like I'm not their kid, they don't care if I go to Princeton or Harvard, right? Or they don't care which one it is. They're here to help me regardless and help me learn. And so having an additional mentor who's not part of the family, at least for me, was really helpful. And so again, like having that theater, there is a director and that's theater, right? There is a teacher, there's a friend, there's someone else there encouraging, and especially if you're going to high schools in this area, that exists. Even if you have to kind of foster it, like I think Eddie fostered it himself a lot, right? But having the independence to do that and being encouraged that it's okay to fail and it's okay to continue moving forward despite the fact that you might be embarrassed on stage one night, who cares, right? You're still going to, if you persist, you will succeed at some point.
Just curious, did you pick your major or your parents made you?
Like, why did I switch away?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about why did I switch away from what I did. It's more about why I was trying to do theater and studio in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a more significant question. And that's because my parents chose that for me in a different way, because it was the opposite of what they wanted, right? And that's how they chose. I mean, they're like, my dad was a computer science. I mean, they never pushed me to do anything specific. I'm gonna be honest. But seeing what my father did, his shortcomings in a specific sense, made me want to do just the opposite. So I had someone to enter college with. In that sense, that was the decision that we had. So changing away, that's a different story. That's more because I felt like I didn't have to study to be good at it. So I kept doing theater even as I was making the transition. Now I'm taking online classes in machine learning, catching up. The initial switch, that wasn't something my parents made me decide.
That's also a difference between liberal arts schools and also some research institutions, is that you do have both the flexibility to switch, which is helpful for a lot of students, but also even in Eddie's case, to continue pursuing your initial passion or your love, but still have an academic focus that can be in another arena. So at least for me, I think that's a big part of why I chose to go to a liberal arts school. Yes, a rigorous one, but certainly a liberal arts school, because I could do engineering and I could do anthropology and I could do some theater and do some music or really whatever. Whereas if I had pursued or had ended up going to more technology-focused school, I would have been on a technology path the whole time. And thinking more complexly would have been difficult. I would have been thinking like a computer versus thinking like a human. Right? Don't just want to be with that. But anyway, yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I have another question for Mia, right?
Yeah.
How your parents foster your leadership? Like you do all this very impressive. How they you do it? So.
I don't know what their answer would be. But certainly having 3 very loud, boisterous sisters did help out. But my whole family, I have 4 girls, my mother and my father, and also a female dog. And so he was constantly bombarded with just insanity. But for me, a lot of it felt like I was surrounded again by other people. So sitting at the dinner table, we had dinner together every night. And sitting at the dinner table, I was exposed to my parents' friends. I was exposed, and even as like a 4-year-old, right? Like my sister is a professional musician, and I remember going to countless of these concerts, and I hated it. I would sit there, and I have no appreciation now for classical music. I just can't do it very well because I sat through hundreds of concerts listening to my sister play what is the best, best classical music you can hear.
Her sister went to Juilliard. Has 2 masters from Juilliard. Three masters from Juilliard, and is considered the best young flutist in the United States, the world. Yeah.
She's really good, but I can't do it, so I don't like
Just
it.
context.
But it did definitely teach me how to be quiet and how to pretend that I'm paying attention, which was a skill. Definitely still useful when I'm not too engaged. But knowing that. Yes, having the expectation that I was an adult was helpful. So in that, in sitting in those audiences, it wasn't fun to be considered an adult. I didn't get to scream and run around and be ridiculous. But at the dinner table, I was also treated like an adult. So that meant if my parents' friends were over, my questions were taken very seriously. If I wanted to engage with certain content, it was taken seriously. It was brought up. I had a voice, if that makes sense. And it wasn't just something to be mapped onto me. It wasn't, oh, Mia, what's your, tell us, come up with a question right now. It was that I just got so used to seeing my parents let me speak and not belittle my questions, but perhaps encourage them with slight constructive criticism, that I was able to feel more comfortable and feel more confident in talking and learning from other people. But I would definitely say it's meeting other people outside my family, meeting my parents' friends, and also just being treated like an adult in every sense. So if I'm treated like an adult in the sense that I have to get my work done, I'm also treated like an adult in the sense that I'm valued in a conversation.
So there's actually, if anyone follows developmental psychology at all for adolescents, take it. There are 2. Oh, sorry, that's a cable. I thought it was your foot. Sorry. There are 2 significant schools of parenting, depending on the culture. One is question-based, the other is directive-based. I mean, which do you think we are? Often the conversations we have as Asian American parents, I don't know why I keep referring to myself as a parent. But the conversation every Asian American parents have, with their kids, it's heavily directive based. So this is an exercise to go home to. You can have keep a mental tally. How many of your statements are questions, and how many of your statements are commands? If it's 50-50, that's still not very good. I'm willing to bet that it's for a lot of us in the audience, it's going to be a little bit higher, more commands than questions. But on the other hand, you look at how exactly someone comes to be a leader, naturally speaking. It's really a genetic thing. I think a lot of Asian Americans, they love to say it's genetics. That's not really true. I mean, there's so much plasticity in the brain. You can't just call it genetics. You look at how a natural leader develops. It's because they're being treated as a leader. That's what they're used to doing. If you're used to being treated as though you're just a subordinate, if you're treated like super low, you're just being given commands. You have no idea what being a leader is like. That particular habit or lifestyle, way of living, just isn't there. So this is a quick exercise. Just keep track of what the ratio is. How many commands, how many questions? And of those questions, how many questions are, have you done your homework yet? And how many of those questions are, how are you doing today? Like, have you followed the news? What do you think about this? Right? And those are the important questions. Because have you done your homework yet is the same thing as do your homework. The sentence structure is meaningless there. Do you want to do that? Go ahead.
Okay, so on that same note, kind of.
Oh wait, if you want to go talk about how to write essays, let's not do that.
Okay.
Yeah, let's say that. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a question? How do you, while you were growing up, how do you feel having a pet actually helped?
Having a what?
A pet, like a dog.
Well, you get to tell your dog what to do.
Yeah, that's so true. So as the youngest, I loved having a dog because my sisters always told me what to do. So like you said, so I told my dog what to do, or the dogs, which didn't go over well with my parents. I think that was probably some of the biggest disciplinary problems we had, was that I was just always telling the dog, I was like this big and the dog was this big, and I was telling it to, walk up the stairs, walk down the stairs, bring me food, which it couldn't do. I wish. I just ate all the food. So it was good for me, actually. I hadn't thought about that too much. I also ended up I have 2 cats, and as a 4th grader, so I was really dedicated to animals. Again, it's the people animals thing. Loved animals. Was online looking at, how many homeless cats there are in Boston. It's cold too, so there aren't as many running around, and that's why they're just getting sick. So I was really, really focused on this, and I found this website, the website petfinder.com, so it's just where you can adopt cats, and was like scrolling through the pages every night. I'd send my mother via email links to all these cats I found, and she was like, my daughter's insane, and already an old cat lady. And she ended up saying, okay, fine, like, you want to get a cat, you'll take care of the cat, or both cats in this case, but fine, we'll get a cat. So I think around my 10th birthday, we drove out to a shelter, picked up 2 lovely cats, who are absolutely wonderful. And for me, these cats also became kind of that emotional support outlet. So I remember I got sad a lot as a kid, especially when my older sisters were being mean to me, or I thought they were being mean to me, who knows if they actually were. And I'd like go cry with my cats. And it definitely felt like a supportive environment because I had these like non-human things to interact with when I didn't know yet how to find those adults. I didn't connect with my teachers yet. I did feel alone. The dogs, I was just about telling them what to do. But it was good, yeah.
But there's something else there too, is that, let's say that, you or your child are, really are a natural leader. But even their leadership style is going to take on what they're used to at home. If they're a natural born leader and the parent is saying, just giving commands, well, that becomes their leadership style. And unfortunately in the US that doesn't fly. It's we got a medical situation. You okay? Alright. Do I get tissue? Alright. So oh, we can keep that. Okay. So
You guys know the bathroom?
yeah. Do you guys know where the bathroom is? You guys know? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, it's just a nosebleed. It's fine. Okay, so end of rubbernecking. So you have to consider what kind of leadership style you or your child is going to be, and that's of course really significant, right? It doesn't fly in the United States to just be bossy, direct things. That is no longer considered good leadership. A leader. You look at something like how the biggest tech companies are structured, and what kind of leadership styles or management styles they take on. And it's really about giving the workers as much control as possible. Letting them take control of whatever they want to do, right? As opposed to Steve Jobs walking into an elevator, micromanaging the hell out of everybody. Yeah, so that's the point I wanted to make. Were there any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So for like a kid who has a lot of different interests, so when they're going to high school, is there a rush for them to, to try to consolidate because college wants to have one or two strong interests, or they they're, and it's still with high school kids, right? So it's kind of, I think the information we get sometimes are contradictory as to whether they should develop something deeper and more meaningful, as to that they should just explore different things and like a lot of different things, but may not be as good as if they. So that there's, I don't know how you guys balance that and what college look at that.
There's a very specific article I read once about how to seem impressive. Not just to college counselors or just in life. The biggest piece of advice was find things that other people aren't doing. So why am I a national champion in cycling? It's because no one's really racing their bikes. But I'm the best at it. And that's what ends up mattering to people. So, I mean, that's the most specific advice I can offer in this kind of shallow way. As to whether or not, they should do one or two things really well, or a lot of things, kind of well. I mean to say that it doesn't really matter. I think that the information is, I think, contradictory for exactly that reason. There's some people who believe it's a slight edge one way, some people believe it's a slight edge one way. But I mean to say that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the achievements are. I mean, my national championship in cycling, that was one after I'd already gotten into college, so that didn't help. It was specifically my writing on it that helped me. My achievements came all after I was excited. So it's about writing on it in a way that it is really deeply introspective and produces something that tells someone about you, right? It's easier to have a sense of who you are if the whole time you were doing it, you've had a sense of who you are. But even if you haven't had that perspective yet, it's easy to develop. It's something that it comes through, either locking yourself in a room and thinking about things about your style, as was mine, or having friends to talk about it with specifically. I think a lot of students are capable of having really deep conversations about where they think their lives are headed. And that brings out a lot of really good stuff to write about. And I think it's the writing that matters, not so much the achievements. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I want to get both of your input.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I certainly agree with Eddie that it's not something that matters either way. But again, it's how you think about it in retrospect and during the experience as well. My resume probably looked ridiculous. It was in high school. I had an extensive amount of extracurricular activities. I have a lot of energy and needed to direct it somewhere outside the classroom, and couldn't decide. And that was okay because all of those things did shape the way that I thought. They changed the way I approached my life. They changed the way I approached other people. And when they came together, they actually did make sense because as I was doing them, I realized how they connected. So take, again, singing in a choir and performing on stage with a whole group of other people. That took both an emotional understanding of expression and also an ability to work with a team. And that actually tied in really well with sitting alone in a room on a phone, hearing someone talk to me, because it was about thinking on my feet, and those two things ended up being, thinking on my feet was reflected in both of those, as well as an honest expression of myself. So even if you have 100 activities, or if your kid has 100 activities that they're interested in, if they're thinking through all of those, at least 95 of them will connect in some way that means a lot to them, because at the end it's still connected to who they are, right? So it's still just an extension of yourself. So if you bring it back to yourself and how you think, then they are connected no matter what.
Thank you. That's great.
Let's do.
Okay, so I mean, as very successful young people here and role model for a lot of kids here. So your parents must be doing a lot of things right. But if you look back in your past time, so do you wish anything that your parents would do differently? So anything that's wrong. I know it's a little bit sensitive question, but good thing your parents are not here.
Yeah. My mom's actually might still be in the audience, but I feel I might have hurt her feelings enough already. That's okay. I think.
Oh, look how great he turned out. There you go.
I think I'll let Mia answer the question first.
Okay. Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
I think a lot for me, I think I had hoped my parents did engage more with my emotional side. So yes, being that kid who cried with her cats, having my parents, they're crying with my cats with me. No, having my parents be open to that kind of vulnerability would have been really useful. I didn't see my parents ever be particularly emotional with me. They were obviously demanding and had expectations, but it felt in a lot of ways like I was going through a leadership program with my family, instead of having a holistic feeling like I could depend on these people. So again, when I went off to college, something that I would have wanted was to know that I could call my mother and constantly, and share whatever happened with her. At the end of the day, have that kind of emotional connection with her, which has definitely increased over time, and now that I am really much more comfortable having those conversations with her, because we do have that distance, so now I don't depend on her in quite the same way, so I can ask her for different things, I think. I have the benefit of doing that. But I definitely think accessing emotions, seeing the vulnerability of my parents in a really honest way that wasn't defensive, and that also didn't demand too much of me in response. So I didn't want to be the emotional, strong, pillar for my parents, but I wanted to know who they were, that they were experiencing things that might have been hard, that raising me and my sisters might have been hard, and also that they were capable of doing it.
As for my answer, I just want to point to just a quick demographic difference here. The first 3 rows, even 4 rows in this audience, are all children and mothers, specifically. That's amazing in terms of this disparity in this gender divide. So for the fathers in the audience, you're doing great, thanks. Good job. And especially, good question. But there is a heavy gender divide in a lot of Asian American communities about. Okay, yeah, I'll speak louder. Thanks, man. That's my mom.
Criticize.
And so there's this gender divide as to who does what in the household, and it's specifically important here, especially for the fathers in the audience, that that there's an analysis as to who's really doing what in the household. So I think for my parents, I think I would have preferred for there to have been a more evening out of the duties in the household. So growing up, for example, I can't actually think of very many skills or abilities I learned from my father. I learned those things from kind of these selected surrogate fathers that I picked up. And I suspect that this is the case for a few of the students in this audience. There's a kind of looking for masculinity, looking for maleness. What does it mean to be a man or a young boy? What does this look like? And the answer is very often absent. So that's another question. Another point I want to bring up, for extracurriculars is that if you can kind of demonstrate that you're conscious or looking for this, and perhaps even found it, it's also really important. So as for answering your question, I would have preferred for my father to have been there to teach me about dating, to teach me, about coding, right? Programming in a way that wasn't entirely inaccessible. To have been taught about the news, U.S. politics, any number of things, and and yet he was kind of off, running a business or something like that. And of course, that's something I appreciate as well, right? Because of course, without the financial support, nothing would have been there. But there is a very substantial element within Asian American fathers too, that they're spending extra time at work because they have a particular ambition. This extra time doesn't necessarily translate to more time at home or more ease at home. So that's something I think, of course it could pay off, I'll readily admit that, but I think that there does need to be an evaluation of what that extra time, that extra investment toward extra, whatever ambition that is will cost, because that does come with a cost. So there's a gender divide, about that. A corollary statement to that is also looking at the relationship between parents. As a result of this kind of gender divide, there often is, then you might know, a lot of tension in the household about, you're the father, you never, spend time with your son, or your father, you never take out the trash. Right? The answer to this is twofold. Fathers take out the trash, and don't get yelled at. That's the most significant advice I can give there. But this is specifically important because kids will actually, and at least, I know certainly from large part of my experience is that parental tension creates a lot of stress, a lot of unease. It creates a lot of emotional defense mechanism making. If you're always around tension, around argumentation, or just constantly anxious, you develop a kind of emotional closed offness to you. And you can readily see this in a lot of Asian American students today. You say, how are you doing? Try to engage them in some kind of emotionally vulnerable topic, and you kind of just hit a wall. And I think that's really serious. That's something that right now may not be super important, but 10, 20 years down the road, when you're dealing with a marriage, or maybe if you can't even find someone to be married to. Not that marriage is the only important thing, but these difficulties do come up, and that that's a long-term investment that's there. So as for what I had hoped my parents would have done, is more just focused on their own relationship in a way that wasn't specifically based off of defensiveness, or accusation. A more careful analysis of gender dynamics in the household would have, I think, put me in a much. It would have given me a head start, I think. That's what I would say. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question, just follow that gentleman's question. In your mind, is there anything you appreciate and be thankful because you have Asian or Chinese parents? Or you think because your parents will come from different culture, it's totally not fitting in American culture, nothing is good, you really prefer all Americanized parenting style? Or is there anything you appreciate?
Yeah, certainly. It's not an either or question. I think a lot of this might come off as specifically Asian parents the worst parents in the world. This isn't true, but I do think that Asian parents might be the most proud parents in the world to some extent, in the sense that there's not a large degree of self-reflection on the culture that's being produced. As for what I'm grateful for, certainly I think that my particular intellectual ability is something I owe a large part to the focus that was there. I do also realize that to make use of it, I had to go elsewhere. If I wanted to use it for things besides the more stereotypical Asian things. But I mean, it's solid, right? I mean, I think that if I were born into, say, a really poor, low-income family, regardless of race, I would have ended up much differently. As for what I would have... Okay, I'll talk a little bit louder. As for what I would have been if I were, born into a very wealthy, very super stable family, there's no way to know, and so I'm not willing to make a judgment on that. But of course, there are unique advantages to being Asian American. It's just that I don't think most people are aware of the particular risks or disadvantages that also come with first generation or immigrant parents that have a very singular mindset. Yeah. So there are, benefits and non-benefits for sure. All right. I want to get back on topic real fast. It took a few questions. We still want to know, what are you guys interested in? Any sense, any hands?
It's best for parents too, I think, for yourself.
Sure. I got this.
Dares.
What's up?
Accepting dares.
Accessing dares? Oh, okay. Wait. Well, is this talking about you personally?
So you're saying we should play some truth or dare right now? Is that what we're getting down to?
No, I mean like that's something that you like doing or are good at. What kind of dares have you taken?
Let's see.
There's just so many. I mean, this guy is a daredevil. I see it in his eyes.
That's awesome.
You give me an example, if you can. Okay, we can move on. I do want to hear though, because that is really interesting, right? This kind of idea that someone can give you this ridiculous task, and you'll be like, yeah, all right, I'll do it. I mean, that to a certain degree is like, oh, like you're, being kind of childish, but there are ways to think about anything. Oh, you got this? All right.
Badminton with my left hand.
With your left hand? High roll over here. Oh my God! Don't set the world on fire. Okay. What else? Can you think of anything? All right, we can give him more time. But yeah, dares. This idea. You can really run away with this topic. You can be dared to do really ridiculous things. You can be dared to push your boundaries. In a way that, if you were to put this in a college essay, it really does say a lot about you. You're saying, I can do this thing I don't think, or other people didn't think I was capable of doing. That's the entire premise of dares, is self-improvement or doing really dumb things. But you can spin it towards the former. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, change that topic a little bit. You mentioned at the beginning that some sentence you put together that made the admission officer almost cry. So, is there a specific sentence you can share with us? It's really interesting.
It's a bit of a longer story. Last time I saved it more towards the end. Save the best for last. No. So there. Yeah, we can come back to it in a little bit. Yeah. But do remind me if everybody's so interested toward the end. Yeah.
Are you covered the changing the visual setting for the can't hear you.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit as well. I can probably save that for in a few minutes. I still do want to have a sense of what people are interested in. I just want to call on people. I know Christina. What's up? What do you like? What are you into?
Well, I like eating food,
Okay.
and I like critiquing it.
Oh, food critique. Okay, food critique, if people don't know, can be vicious, right? Like food critique is like, this is like a 1-star chef, like a Michelin star. You can only get 3 stars, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say you're a 1-star chef, right? And this top food critic walks into your room, just ratatouille's everything, just like tears you apart. Whereas to an ordinary person, this might be the most delicious thing in the world. Right? Food critique can be entirely vicious. The world of food critique is for monsters. And I'm terrified of you now. Please don't critique this lecture. I'm kidding. But have you like written about food and?
No, it's usually like my parents cook, so I'm like, oh, these are the great things, and could you maybe add some more toll?
Okay. Someone's like, yeah. Okay, that's cool. That's good. I mean, that's the kind of answer I'm looking for. In the sense that it can be kind of a mundane thing. that I think a lot of parents can overlook in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you could be the most talented food critic in the world, but if your parents don't believe that it's a worthwhile thing, or if you don't have any particular ability whatsoever, then that's lost, not just to you, but to the world, right? We would never know what that 1-star Michelin chef, what their food tasted like. What a travesty.
That's what I liked at MIT. They had, so everyone, there were a bunch of people who were going, and I think it was chemical engineers specifically. So they went through all the core requirements for chemical engineering, and then they realized they were like, we just love food and we like cooking, and so now they have a really, really strong food chemistry program, which is tied into their food critic program. So they have this big group of students now who are really passionate about food, but are still getting this really, really strong education. But because they were so enthralled in that kind of stuff, a little bit different, I guess, than what you're into. It ended up producing a whole field and a whole division of really elite people doing that kind of work.
So who here has heard of bacon ice cream? Okay, Christina has because she's the expert. Well, bacon ice cream, okay, it doesn't seem like things you put together, but apparently it's incredible. And that comes from this field of science, one would say, of molecular gastronomy, which is really just chemical engineering and neuroscience put together. So, if you, let's say you're a food critic and you write about that with a great essay, plus, high enough test scores, boom, you go to MIT chemical engineering. So, I mean, that's something that can be particularly special if you can get into it. But yeah, I want to think about that. What else do you want to? Tell me about you. Do it. What's your name?
Angela.
Angela? Hi.
I like Greek mythology, Greek Roman mythology, and baking, healthy desserts.
Healthy desserts. Okay, more food. All right. Don't keep it away from your scene. She'll tear you apart. Okay, cool. So Greek mythology. What specifically about it?
The pantheon and kind of just the stories about how they explain the world.
About what last one?
About how they explain the world.
Okay. All right. So I mean, I think I share that interest as well to a degree, in the sense that I'm really interested in how different cultures make sense of the world. Different creation stories, different creation myths. Because it does give you an insight as to, I mean, it can be oh, here we go. I mean, it can be kind of a scientific question, right? In the sense that you're poking at how people made sense of the world, right? But B, it can be a cultural question, right? You're looking at this inside, you're using it as a window into something. Well, it's because my voice is lost. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? I'm pick on more folks. What about you? Besides bleeding out. Anything. What about it? So what specifically about how they work? Architecture level?
How they all work together to operate in the program.
Okay, systems level stuff. This is more this is on a lower level thing, but have you heard of IBM's NeuroCore? So typical computer architecture, that's the von Neumann architecture, right? That's pretty basic transistor level stuff. But IBM's putting something together that is not von Neumann architecture, it's neural architecture on the hardware level. So instead of simulating a neural network, you just have it there on the chip. And it can do things like, it can simulate a rat brain, or rather you can run the program of a rat brain on it. I think something like 4,000 times faster than typical von Neumann architecture chips. I always thought that was, since hearing about it, I thought that was incredible. But that's also a reason I kind of got into neuroscience. Now, it's probably not something that is what you're interested in exactly, but there are always things that, you know what kind of aspect you're into, there are things out there that people are doing that are pushing that aspect. These are people like you, right? Who it's like, you know, I like how systems come together. I like things as a program that comes together, right? And you can push that boundary with, you know, by seeing what the research is there. And doing that of your own volition, like that's, I mean, of your own volition, that's hard to say now because I'm telling you to do it. But looking at that research, that, you know, and showing that you looked at it, that shows something too. It means you're not just like, oh, I don't just like this myth. I like it so much, I want to know everything about it. You know what I mean? I get like one more person. Yeah, you first.
Could all the students raise their hands? Everyone? So I can get a feel. Who's still in high school, I guess, or middle school or whatever.
Okay.
Oh, I got a bunch of people. Okay, cool. Can I grab the blue, yellow shirt? What's your name, too?
Nick.
Nick? All right, cool.
Okay, so like I do a lot of coding and stuff.
Cool. What do you like about coding, or what interests you about it?
So like I do a lot of like competition coding, but I'm getting like into like writing applications and stuff.
Okay, so competition coding, and then you're writing applications. What about competition coding? Like, is there something exciting about it for you, or like what?
I guess like it feels fun to like try and like solve problems that like you don't have to like use math. You can use a computer and stuff.
So it's like your computer is your math class. You don't have to take calculus; it just does it for you.
Do you feel like? I mean, I think competition coding is pretty gnarly. It's pretty badass.
Do you do like the full 24-hour hackathon style?
No, I'm just doing like the 3-hour Proco stuff.
Oh, cool.
Cool. So what kind of things are you competing in?
I'm mainly doing like these challenges and stuff. Like first year, so like 6 contests every year. Okay. And now and then, like, someone tells me, oh, you should try this competition. I'm like, okay, sure, why not?
So do you have like a fervor for like you just love winning?
Yeah.
Yeah, all I do is win. Yeah, I mean, do you feel like you have a sense of what that's doing for you in your life? Because like, you know, it's fun. But so is smoking weed. So is smoking that dope.
Yeah.
But I want to know, yeah, so.
Yeah, I feel like, so like, pretty much like the basis of like coding is mostly like optimizing code so people can run more things in like shorter time. Instead of, so help people make their lives more efficient when they use the system. Like you can solve problems faster. Like there are ways of solving a problem that a computer can take like 5 days and change that into like a second with optimization.
Sure. Yeah, so I was just talking about like hardware optimization, which is of course a much different problem. But well, you know, I was curious about like how is that relevant to you, right? I mean, yeah, like optimization is pretty sweet, right? Like getting things to do things faster, better, this improvement. That feels good to just think about. But I want to know what about you that is speaking to you. How that's changed you.
Well, I feel like by learning about this, I realized that time is like of the essence, and I need to like manage my activities. And time is limited for every person. And I feel like I lead like more of like an organized, planned out life instead of just do whatever.
So it helps, like it's the kind of thing that helps you pack as much stuff into your life as possible. Yeah, I get it. What's up?
One of my coworkers where I'm working right now, she's studying visual arts and computer science, and she describes using, so this, I think this was part of her college essay actually too. She described using coding as the same experience as painting for her. So having your code run and build for her feels the same as painting a beautiful picture, which I think at first a lot of people hear and they're like, that is ridiculous. And yet for her, if she's producing some kind of art form, even if it isn't visual art, through coding, and so they're like, is a mutual part of it. But it sounds like you're also more in that competitive drive. At least that's what I'm taking from it, because I like the competition.
Yeah. No, it's cool. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there was this like competition problem where you had to like, so they gave you like the pixel images of like drawings, and then you had to identify like using a program what type of drawing it was. That was interesting.
That's pretty sweet.
But hard.
Cool. Yeah, so I mean, just to kind of draw back to my experience, I really do resonate with the idea that, you know, you can optimize things. I think that there's a lot of things that we kind of, like a lot of processes that we take for granted in life, which is like, I guess I'll tie my shoe this way, right? But what if I could tell you there's a way you can tie your shoe in a 10th the amount of time? Well, most people don't really care because it's tying their shoes, but I am kind of the kind of person who wants to know, like, tell me how to tie my shoe. I know I have a friend who's a Stanford PhD student and a Google AI researcher, and his life is devoted to making himself the most like computationally powerful person alive. I mean computation in the sense that, like, I don't mean smart, because smart can mean a lot of things, but I mean smart, you know, computation, like if you give him like any kind of problem, right, and like, you know, it doesn't matter what you know, what kind of problem, he just wants to be the fastest, the best at it. And so he is devoted his life to just figuring out these small ways, these, you know, supposed life hacks. And now I'm building a machine with him and with EddieMia that zaps your brain to make you more intelligent. So this is like how far this guy wants to go in his life. You know, this is like, he doesn't want to just optimize his programs, he doesn't want to just optimize his shoe tying. He wants to literally optimize his brain by running electricity through it. And you know, I study neuroscience, so I have a vague sense of what I'm doing. Mia does a lot of, has done some electrical engineering. She has a big sense of what she's doing. And he just wants to do it. I don't think he has any sense, but he wants to just go and do it. And so what you do is you just hook it up. You hook up like a digital potentiometer to an Arduino chip, to two sponges on your head. Depending on where you change the location of the sponges on your head, the current will run through different circuits. And that will optimize different kinds of cognitive function. So he wants to be the best reasoner, like the least fallacious, most airtight, you know, logically valid reasoner that there is. And so he's just going to run this electricity through his prefrontal cortex for 20 minutes a day until he is that person. So that's his deal, you know. But I think that, you know, the more I kind of thought about that side of myself, that's kind of what it came to. It's just like, I want to experience so much of my life. I don't have time to do suboptimal things. You know, if there's a better way to tie my shoe, I'm going to do it. If that saves me 9 seconds, well, over the course of my life, that's going to be 2 days. 2 days, what can I do with 2 days? I'm going to take a vacation to Hawaii, but I'm going to take the best vacation, you know, like so on and so forth. So there's all this stuff that's there. I think it can reflect a certain kind of person or a kind of personality trait. So that's there. I mean, do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I think all that is to say is when you're looking at your own interests, is to ask those kinds of questions like Eddie is asking you, when you're going to write your college essay, or when you're just going about your life as a student, as someone who's participating in these activities. Why are you doing it? A big thing for me is understanding what the point of it all is. Like, I don't get, for example, with computers, I have very hard time using Python on my computer. Upper level coding languages, programming languages, I don't like using them very much. Though I'm supposed
You code in binary.
I love coding in binary. And that's because, so I like the low-level hardware stuff because I don't get who wrote these functions, I don't get why they work, I don't understand it. So I need to understand like the low-level reasoning for something, the justification. I want to see the electrons flow or else I get really irritated. Or just don't understand. So the same thing applies to activities in my life. So if my parents tell me, go be the best swimmer in the state, fine, I guess. Okay, I'll try my best, which won't happen. I won't be the best swimmer probably in the state, but you know, I'll give it a try. But if I don't understand why they're telling me that, if I don't understand why for me I'm doing that, I won't feel as good necessarily about succeeding, and I won't know how to frame or explain to someone else what it means for me to have become the best swimmer in the state. So a lot of writing college applications, writing these essays, doing the Common App, the Universal App, whatever that new thing is. I saw that on Princeton's website today. Is figuring out why this stuff matters. Who cares, right? Okay, great, your parents might have cared. Your friends might think it's cool. You might have kind of enjoyed it. But why did it matter? Maybe you didn't enjoy it. Maybe that's important, is that you spent your whole life dedicated to becoming the best swimmer in the state, and you actually just hate swimming. And every time you go in the pool, that's all you think about. And that's okay, right? That's important to think about if that's your reality. So in writing these essays, I think a big thing and a big part of why we wanted to go through and talk through some of your interests is because it matters how you think about them. It matters that you are conscious while participating in these activities, that you go about life more actively. And I think so a big part of me being friends with Eddie lately has been that I get to question what I'm doing, how I speak, and how I behave, because there's someone else who is also actively engaging with me. So that's true of, luckily for me, going to Swarthmore, I've had a lot of my peers do that and question me and wonder why I am the way I am. And that helps me also understand, well, why am I going to go live in California for a month and teach this program? If I'm unhappy, why am I, like, I need to know if I'm not happy right now, maybe why I'm not happy, but also why did I choose to be here in the first place? Because then I can go back and assess, okay, in the future, if those are my reasons, maybe I shouldn't go ahead and do it. So it helps me in life decide, okay, if this makes sense for me or not. And that comes through in a college essay. So I think a big thing, and maybe we can talk about your tearjerker soon, in those college essays is saying, or a big thing for me, I went to a really fancy high school in Boston that had 2 college counselors on staff for 50 students. And I got to have weekly meetings with a college counselor who was absolutely wonderful. And most of what he had me doing was essentially life coaching. So he sat down and talked to me about my life, talked to me about what I cared about, and then that eventually came out through my essays. And certainly I, for my school, didn't have great grades. I had decent SAT scores and had a really strong group of extracurricular activities, but hadn't yet understood entirely why all those things connected and how they mattered. And so the process of application writing for me was sitting down and again engaging with why. Why am I doing this? Why does it matter to me? It might be totally different than why swimming matters to Eddie, but that's okay and that's good. And that's what most of these admissions officers are looking for. They're looking for why it matters to you, not why you and your whole group joined in on it.
So, there are a few hands that went up. What was your question again? I just, about admissions students. So I mentioned that a little bit at the beginning. It's the idea that colleges are run entirely like businesses. They're not looking for, they're not looking for anything other than to make you pay for their service. And that's how I think they should be seen. Unfortunately, in providing this service, they do encounter liabilities, many of which are often Asian American students, Asian American and South Asian American students. And this comes in a variety of forms, but the easiest way to sum it up is that these are all things that can be addressed by having a person who is functional, socially, emotionally, intellectually, and so on and so forth. It goes beyond just saying, somebody's well-rounded, because I think that's become something of a cliche, in the sense that, now to assess well-roundedness, you just look at someone's achievements. But even then, that might not tell you very much. What does tell you very much is how someone thinks about their achievements, and that makes colleges feel much better about taking on an Asian American student, who, given the current state of things, Asian Americans are, does anyone know what percentage Asian Americans are in tech companies in terms of employment? It's about 50%. That's very high. But then you look at executive positions or board positions. Asian Americans all of a sudden now take up a different number. Does anyone know what that percentage is? It's about 8%. So there's a 6-fold drop, going from just doing basic coding work to actual leadership work in terms of representation. Right? This fixed role job, it's a number, but it indicates a lot about how a company sees somebody. So an Asian American, relative to any other employee of any other race, is seen as having about 6 times less leadership potential. I mean, that's really significant. And so colleges, of course, as businesses, don't operate that much different from these large companies, and they'll look at an Asian American applicant profile and say, well, what are they going to have to offer us? In 10 years, when they've graduated and have their own lives, like how much are they going to donate to us? What's their network going to look like? What's their total asset worth? I mean, these are all really kind of, I guess you say, cynical questions that I'm asking of the colleges, but that's indeed what they're doing. And so Asian American students don't mean so much anymore. If they're only looking at test scores, they can't grasp people with these non-cognitive abilities. So they've reintroduced these not reintroduced, they've played up the importance of these non-cognitive traits in terms of looking for who they want to admit. Because they're, potentially, people with these traits are going to be much less damaging for the college, or much less potential of doing so. And in return, we're going to give back much more. So that's what the lecture can be summed up as. For questions, I think we can move on to questions. We'll still have some content, of course, in answering these questions. But does anyone have anything before we talk about what my essay was for college?
I have a question. You mentioned there were some kind of skills that you sort of figured out, like you said, you had sort of people skills when you were you found it in high school. So how did you kind of expand on these innate talents and interests you had, and like join communities and then turn them into something that
some of it was just pursuing what I was genuinely interested in. So in going to, do you go to high school around here?
Yeah.
Where do you go to school?
Homestead High School.
Okay. Cool. So there there's a bunch of stuff going on, right? What's awesome about most of these high schools is they do have a plethora of activities. And on a very basic level, finding one of those is helpful, right? So as a starting point. And that can differ for every person. So one thing so for me as someone who's in tech right now, in a lot of ways I don't fit the profile of a person who should be working in technology, right? I'm a young white woman with not so great engineering grades, mechanical engineering, not software engineering. And I really like talking to people, so sitting in an office space on my computer often isn't the best thing for me. But in that environment, just bringing myself to it has actually been really fun and has been really useful for me and really positive for me. So I get to be my natural, talkative self, because it turns out a lot of my coworkers actually want to do that as well. Helps me learn the code that I haven't yet learned. It helps me learn, I'm programming in C#, which I've never used before. So a lot of the coworkers are communicating about that more now. And it also means that in looking at the technology we're producing, I get to bring to the table the human side of it. So saying, I've sat down and I've thought about the effect of the technology we're going to use on people, and I get to throw those ideas off someone like Eddie too, because he's a little bit better at it than I am. So because of those inherent things in me, or those things that I've developed, I can bring them to an environment where it might seem totally unexpected. So bringing yourself to that. So let's say you're typically a really quiet person, but you're I'm kind of interested in theater. There are a lot of spaces where being that quiet person in theater matters a lot. Be it being in the tech crew, working behind the stage and making sure everything's organized, be it as an assistant stage manager, as a prop manager, or be it as an actor who's on the stage. Even if you're not totally confident being in public, maybe playing that role that reflects who you are emotionally, or maybe letting the stage be that one outlet where you're comfortable speaking, where you don't, that it's not really you, it's the lines on the script, right? It's a script. So you can pretend to be something else and you don't have to be loud as yourself. Does that make any sense? So I guess in response, finding any activity, if it's playing badminton, I can see that, but or whatever your parents want you to do, okay, but still bringing yourself to it. And then beyond that, again, just hopping into all those activities, trying them out, meeting different people, because they'll totally change the way you think and how you'll go about other activities you do. I don't know if you have a better response.
Did that answer your question, or do you want me to?
Sure.
Okay. What was your question?
Like, would you find like you have some sort of skill or interest? How do you kind of find communities that help you inspire?
Sure. Once you have a certain interest, is what you said?
Or skill.
Like, or skill.
So like she was saying that I was saying that I personally knowledge
Sure.
images.
Yeah, I mean, I like to do it just kind of grassroots. So I like to ask around. You know, if you know, it's not a particularly awkward conversation. It's like, hey, you know, like, you know, you have a friend, you're like, hey, I like this. But if you were to give me a recommendation for like what I want to do, like, what would it be? You know, it doesn't. I mean, that's kind of even more formal than I would even ask it in real life. But you know, there are ways to ask. Just like ask around, get an idea of what people want, and also, you know, that idea sometimes, like ideas for that can sometimes just come along. You know, like with me in cycling, that book was just assigned in a classroom. To my knowledge, I was the only person who read the book and was like, I want to be this guy, which itself might be kind of a poor choice, of course. But you know, about that, it just came along. It was something that awoke, you know, a desire within me I didn't know I had. I just pulled everything together. So, you know, it can be a matter of waiting, it can be a matter of looking around. It could be a matter of just throwing yourself into things that you don't even think you're gonna like, and then applying that skill regardless. Because sometimes a lot of these, you know, a lot of skills, let's say people skill that applies anywhere. You can be valuable in that regardless.
I would also say thinking about and reflecting on those skills, and for some people, I think like journaling about it is really useful. So if you don't necessarily have someone who you're, so like let's say, it took me a long time to be confident in talking about what I'm interested in, or conversations with new people. So even like going into new work environments, I'm like, how do I talk to this person? And I'm a lot more comfortable now, but that's only because I've sat down and I've thought through where I'm at with myself, and then I can do it with other people. So if you want to introduce those skills, but you're not totally sure how they work or how they operate in those environments, just thinking about it, I think that's something that Eddie does really well. Like he's all over the internet with all his thoughts now. But he is able to sit down and write it out. So expressing it in a way that works for you, like obviously now I'm a talker, but in some circumstances, you know, you can be a writer, you can be a performer, but finding that one outlet that lets you think and lets you process and be really conscious of who you are, what your skills are, and why they matter, and how they can fit. So even like, let's say you have a list of activities in your high school, and someone hands you like the clubs list, and you have the next day you have to decide. If you go through and write in your journal, okay, I know that I'm really good at, what's something that you think is a skill that you have? Debating, okay, cool. So I'm really good at debating. If you can go through that whole list and say, okay, how would I apply debating to each of these things? How would I use that skill in all of and I'm sure you can probably apply it to most of them, right? But then figuring out, okay, so which way do I feel the most excited about applying this skill? Like, am I excited about debating in my cooking club? Well, maybe because you like baking and you can hang out. But otherwise, like, maybe that's not where you want to do it. Maybe you want to do it in the student government. Maybe you want to do it in a political group. But you have to figure out then, how can this be adapted in all these different ways? How adaptable you are, and then also which one is most preferable. Does that make any sense?
I'm glad you answered that question too, because I hate lists.
Oh yeah. You can tell he's not, I'm like, I love the structure because my brain is like...
All right, any other questions? Other questions? We got it all? All right.
You can also always come back to the Learning Center, and I mean, Eddie will be here to teach.
So who's still interested in what I wrote about my essay? Oh, did you have a question? Okay, you were interested. All right. Is anyone opposed? If you don't want to hear, you can just leave. All right. So my particular essay.
Sorry.
So, yeah, I mean, my essay had a lot to do with thinking about why I did something. You know, they weren't things I necessarily understood at the time. The central event in my essay was I was having my hair cut in this barber shop, and I couldn't stand it. I hated it, and I grabbed the clippers. Well, no, I asked if I could grab the clippers, and I ended up giving myself a haircut. And it was a very strange event for me. And I didn't necessarily understand why I was so upset at the time, but in a greater context, I thought about it. I put it together. So the first sentence of my college essay to Swarthmore, the essay was just called "Why Swarthmore? Why are you applying here?" The first sentence was, "I'm applying to Swarthmore because I have OCD." And I don't mean OCD in the sense that people use it now, where it's like, oh, I'm organized. I mean like actual diagnosed OCD. Part of this OCD meant that, you know, because of certain stresses during childhood and so on and so forth, I started to pull out my hair about around the time I was 9. Pulled out so much hair, I left like I looked like I was male. It was like male pattern balding. I was like it was just the hair missing, this chunk, big triangle here. All the hair was gone. And I had to grow all sorts of stupid haircuts to cover it up. Just grew like really long hair, terrible bangs for years. And going through high school, there'd always be little spots of hair missing. People are like, "Where'd your hair go?" And I go, "Oh, I bald seasonally." There's no such thing, at least to my knowledge. If one of you is seasonally balding, I'm sorry, but there's no such thing to my knowledge. So that's the excuse I came up with. But one year I got tired of having to pull out my hair to deal with my stress all the time. I just tried to stop. And I decided to brute force it. I shaved my head and all my hair off, but I started from the sides. I worked my way up. And towards the end, I was like, no, I'm gonna leave the strip in the center. Because if I shaved off all my hair, and I stopped pulling, then how would I know I was genuinely stopping pulling? It just means I couldn't pull it. I'm gonna leave it there, and it's gonna be a symbol, right? It's gonna be a haircut I want to keep, right? Because if I pull it out, obviously the haircut's ruined. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep my habit this way, by having this mohawk down the center of my neck. That was my symbol of strength, and it came time to apply to colleges. I still had this mohawk. It was about like 8 inches long. It was huge. It was tall. It was gorgeous. I thought it was amazing. But I had to go to college. I had to go to college interviews, and I didn't want to go to school on the West Coast. I didn't want to go to Berkeley. Didn't want to go to any of the UCs. Wasn't really interested in applying to Stanford. I wanted to get out of the state. I wanted to experience what it was like. But of course, in the East Coast, things are quite a bit more formal, right? Things are a little bit more strict. So I was, I was preparing for these interviews, and someone said, you should probably cut your hair. East Coast colleges are a little bit more conservative, right? It's not like Berkeley where you can, live in a tree, and that becomes your dorm room. It's different. I mean, nowadays the tree stuff isn't happening because there are too many Asian students, and they don't care about the trees. But on the East Coast, right, no one's living in the trees at all, unfortunately. And things are more conservative, and I was going to have to do my hair for college interviews. And despite my protests, my mom took me to the barber. And I sat in the barber shop, and this is where the event was. I was getting this haircut all of a sudden. It just meant so much to me, right, this whole thing. This massive plume of, practically feathers on my head. I just didn't want to lose it. But the haircut was starting, and there's cutting inside, and it started to get into where the mohawk was, and I couldn't take it. I just asked, can I cut this myself, right? If I have to cut it, let me be the one to do it. So I started cutting, and of course I saved a little bit. It looked stupid now because it was only slightly longer than everyone else. But I went off to my college interview at Swarthmore. My mom was like, "Oh, but you still have this tiny mohawk. What about it?" And I was like, "Mom, if they're gonna judge me because of my hair, forget it. Then they don't matter to me. Right? I'm not gonna go to their school." And Mom was like, all right, can't control this one. So I, went to the interview. And so I finished my interview, and I was sitting outside. I remember pretty vividly sitting outside, talking to the two of the admissions counselors, and they were just talking to me about my hair. They're like, "Hey, like, did you do something? Did you like cut your mohawk off a little? Like, were you just not committing to your mohawk?" And I said, "Oh, I had to cut it because, I thought, it was conservative, and it just ended up being bad. I thought this was really conservative." And the admissions officer was, "Oh my God, you thought this was Williams?" And he goes, and he just points me around, like, "Oh, everybody, Eddie thought this was Williams," and just humiliates me fair. But I take it okay, and I walk out thinking it was pretty funny. And so in my essay, I write this whole story. I said I was writing to my admissions officer who read it. I said, like, Nick, when you said, oh, like everybody, Eddie thought this was Williams, and you said this hair is totally acceptable here, that I was accepted there. That's why I want to go to Swarthmore. He told me after, he was like, I was crying, it was bad. And then Tanya read it, my other friend, who's another officer, she started crying. That was the essay. That was why I wanted to go to Swarthmore, because I pull out my hair a lot. Yeah. Cool. If you guys have any other more direct questions, you can come up to us and ask. Otherwise, don't keep me. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Really?
Hey.
Yeah. Hey.
You mentioned that you're pretty good at video game editing, right? Obviously get out that. What gets you out of that?
Yeah, it was happening. I distinctly remember playing video games up until I was 13.
Okay.
14 is when I found the collection. And I think that's not just a correlation. I think that's very significant in the sense that I found something where I had control. My parents said, you know what, just forget it. I can't deal with you. Go to the black shop, do whatever you want. And that's, and that's where it started. I realized video games were what I wanted to do. I had control over this new thing. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, I've been working, so I'm working with like 10 to 14
Of course, video games can actually
for this month, and they're super